we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Issue number 2.
We didn't get kicked off the show after the first one.
You almost did.
I wouldn't doubt it.
If anybody watched Nerd Talk this week, Tony almost was your replacement. And then, of course, Boss Tech offered up his service. But no, Michael's here. He actually showed up for Comic Book 101 because he wants to talk to you all about this week in comic books. We're trying to bring that comic book store feeling to you each and every week. Of course, I am one of your hosts. I am the Princess of Weird, Josh Johnson. And to my left, of course, my co-host, or
Michael,
also host.
Photographer of Cosplay in Tampa Bay. You can find me everywhere.
Yeah,
just
at Cosplayer in Tampa Bay.
Cosplay in Tampa Bay. Not cosplayer. I don't cosplay.
Yeah. No.
You don't want to see me cosplaying.
Maybe we'll do that. At some episode, we have to cosplay. I'll come in looking dippy fresh. I already wear the hat all the time. So you come in looking
I'll wear
like...
my onesie.
There you go.
Red panda onesie, I'll wear that.
We'll definitely have to cosplay somewhere down the line. Because how can we talk about people doing cosplay and the world of cosplaying without us getting a little dabble into it?
For me, I'd rather take photos.
I'd rather take the photos.
That's why I don't cosplay. I don't like being in front of it. I don't like people taking photos of me.
I find this funny because he's about to say, I don't like being in front of the camera, and yet here we are hosting Comic Book 101 and Nerd Talk each and every week.
But I don't want to be in front of a camera taking photo of me.
I can understand that. It's a different world altogether. Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Comic Book 101. This is issue number 2. We're going to start things off with a little bit of housekeeping from issue number 1. We're not going to clean a house. What we're actually going to do, our housekeeping segment, is where we're going to address some of the things that we talked about in the previous episode or the previous issue and address them here. Obviously, we may make goofs. We might say something.
We're perfect. We'd never mess up.
Look, in my perfection, I can even admit I have flaws because that is what makes me perfect. However, we're going to address some of the things that we talked about in the previous episode and address them here and get some clarification, get something to you guys that, everybody wants to be well informed. Once again, it's like being in a comic book shop, but we're not selling you comic books. So the first bit of good housekeeping is we talked about first comic books that people started to read, and one of our fans actually said Super Goof, and we had never heard of this comic book.
Still never heard of it.
Whatsoever, but one of our loyal viewers, a woman by the name of Cherry Lane, wound up finding the image of Super Goof #1. It is a Walt Disney's comic book from 1965. The very first issue was on October the 1st, and this ran for 74 issues all the way until March 1st. Damn. Now, Super Goof is the heroic personality of Goofy from the Disney plethora
I don't know
of...
how we didn't get that by the name.
Yeah, we kind of did. We said that it might be some kind of thing, but here it is. Photographic evidence that Super Goof actually exists, and he's in modern continuity, too. If you watch Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and stuff like that, Goofy will adorn it.
Disney owns Marvel, so King Goofy, Super Goof, be in the next Marvel movie.
Dude, imagine that Marvel crossover. Yuck. Welcome to the Avengers. But the one thing that made Super Goof so amazing was basically because if you're Goofy, what would your superpower be? He turns into Superman. But he's still as flumbly and goofy, and he's the ever-sane Goofy that we all love and talk about. But he has super speed, X-ray vision, super strength. He can fly. Goofy doing all these amazing things underneath our noses. However, once again, this comic isn't in graphic novel form. We usually say buy the trade paperbacks, get the graphic novels on Comic Book 101, but you can't do it with Super Goof.
Can you still find copies of that comic?
Actually, you can. This comic is so old and so many people do not want it that if you did a basic eBay search right now for Super Goof, you'd be able to find some issues relatively cheap. Under $10.
Right,
yeah, please do. I'm actually going to try to buy a couple issues of Super Goof just to try to check it out and see what there is.
Comic $3.
Here are the live searches, and once again, relatively unexpensive. If you go to eBay to buy some of these comics, they're so old.
10 cents right now for
1965 all the way to I had it in here in my notes, but I lost it. But it ran for 74 issues. It ran for until 1968, I want to say, with all those issues. And to this day, you can still find some of these things relatively cheap, like $5 per issue. That's amazing for a comic from 1965. Next
Check that
up, we also talked about in our good housekeeping from last week, exclusive pops that we happen to really love and enjoy from whether New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con. And I had mentioned my favorite was a Superman one, which I obviously do not like Superman. I made sure we moved the set so we didn't have that Superman thing in the background. But I'm not a big Superman fan. And I decided, Rob's telling me Superman is still looking over me, which can't do much about that. We're on the Nerd Talk set today. We're going to be changing around our set. But nevertheless, San Diego Comic-Con 2016 released this Funko Pop of the False God Superman. I couldn't remember the name last week, or I thought it was a New York Comic-Con exclusive as well. But no, it was actually a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive that came out in 2016. You could have bought them in GameStops, I believe, because that's where I got mine, because usually they'll pop up Walmart's, GameStops for these con exclusives.
And that's a Batman versus Superman.
Yes, that was Batman versus Superman. That's actually taken from the statue that we see out in front of Metropolis that people have now graffitied because of the way they view Superman at some point in that movie. I thought it was just amazing. Like, I don't own Superman stuff, but I had to get that one because it was so unique to anything. No, it actually sits there. All my Funko Pops sit in boxes. But that brings us to our next topic of this week. What figures have you purchased?
Ooh, so I had some fun. We went comic book shopping, me and my niece, this past weekend, and I found a random little Marvel Legends Cosmic Spider-Man.
It's a very nice figure. Are you going to open it up? You going to let that bad boy breathe here tonight?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm just going to rip it open and not care and
just
tear it
let the world have it. Go at it, sir.
See, this is hard for me. I like to keep everything packaged, hang them on the wall. But you know what? We're just gonna. I'm not even gonna be nice about it.
Rob's saying you're not gonna have a stroke on us now, are we?
Yeah, I might have a stroke. Ooh.
Rob, our producer in the back, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. He's opening up the box. He's just tearing through this. I'm a little bit neater with it.
There we go.
This is an amazing Marvel Legends figure here.
I dropped the other piece.
This was made by Hasbro.
And he comes with a couple extra little heads, so you can swap the heads out.
Oh,
yeah,
it's always good to have extra head, Mike, you know. A little headroom.
We all need head.
Yeah, it's what everybody wants,
Nothing
everybody
bad.
needs. Yeah,
Nothing
we're
bad.
talking like Al Snow head, right? You know, if you're for all you wrestling fans out there, Al Snow's head. But yeah, no, that's an amazing figure. I love these Hasbro figures so much because, once again, I will always say it's always in the detail with certain things. And here you see this Cosmic Spider-Man after he gained the power Cosmic from Mr. Universe. And look at that, like... And then, once again, to swap the heads, you can switch it out to a Peter Parker head here or a different version.
Peter Parker, there he is with a beard.
Yeah, because this is from Earth 13, I believe.
Yeah. And what's cool is with this, it comes with little extra pieces where you can build another figure.
Oh, that's one of the things that I always loved about the Marvel.
Build Vulture.
Yeah, the Marvel Hasbro line was always amazing with these things. You started seeing a lot of other companies steal that mold. Yeah. Like I collect wrestling figures, and they started doing that with their Mattel Elite series of packaging figures, so that when you buy the whole series, if you're able to get them, you get a bonus figure added on top of it.
And it's a smart thing because it makes you want to buy all of them.
Oh yeah, definitely. And even characters that you don't really like at times. You're like, I gotta buy them all. I gotta get this like the 25th Deadpool I already own, just so I can get the leg of Colossus.
And what makes it more is that person you build is usually the one that's sought after collectibles. I remember I was at a comic convention, and my old roommate wanted Sentinel. And you had to buy like a dozen different figures to put them, and they were selling it for $200 for that Sentinel.
Oh yeah, and they always
bought that outright, so you didn't have to go figure hunting.
I was debating on starting a figure collection of. You know how sometimes it is you work with certain celebrities and stuff like that. I got the chance to, because I work in professional wrestling, I've worked with a lot of different guys in and out of the ring and did many a different capacity, and I thought about building an action figure collection based off of guys that I've actually done shows with. One of the big ones was J.J. Dillon of the Four Horsemen. I got to do an interview with him and stuff like that. Went to go look up his one and only action figure that he has. It was a Build-A-Figure, and it's already up like to $50 to $100 depending on where you go, because you got to get 4 other figures just to get the one J.J. Dillon figure. So, all right. that is what you happen to open this week. Me, I'm opening up a little bit different. I collect an assortment of different toys. One of the things that I like to collect that I've started to get into a little bit is the Imaginext series.
Yeah, I thought that was your daughter's.
No, this is actually...
I'm like, oh, you brought his kids' toys with him.
Yeah,
today.
no, this one is actually mine. I actually have this little Batman Joker. It was the first Imaginext that I bought. I have a thing
Sound
for...
like that little guy.
Yeah, I have a thing for Joker when he's dressed as Batman for some reason. I have a nice little collection of that kind of stuff. So I wound up buying that one, and then I wound up going and getting this one not too recently. Wasn't that badly priced, and as we know, I'm going to open this bad boy. I like opening my figures. Like, once again, there's just something about having a figure that... Oh, see if this pops off.
Too.
Yeah, highly child-proof. I hate these little plastic things that they started sticking on figures so you can't steal them. But then when you buy the figure and you're like trying to bring them at home, you can't do anything with them. All right, there's my little Joker mobile. We'll put this little guy in here. With his little plunger. He can drive over there. And once again, like for a child's
and
toy,
even Joker comes with a plunger.
Yeah,
So he's going to have a plunger attack.
yeah. This was made in 2016 by Imaginext, and Imaginext is a Fisher-Price product. Now, the age limit for these things is usually like 3 years old to like 5 years old, but if you're like a little kid,
whatever.
Yeah, like all action figures, they're just collectibles to me. So you're able to get like these nice little figures, and you know, for a little kid's line, that's not that bad. Figure costs like around under $10 off of Amazon, so it wasn't that bad of a little deal to get something unique and interesting, especially if you're like me. I just buy figures at times of characters I like, just so I can build up my collection of like, okay,
that's usually the figures I buy now are certain characters I like or pops of certain series. Like I'm collecting all the Spider-Man pops.
Yeah,
because I love Spider-Man.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about Spider-Man a little bit later on in this episode. But I do got to ask you, did you do anything interesting over the weekend?
So I was watching my niece over the weekend, and we hit up Emerald City Comics.
Nice.
Did some shopping there. Then we went over, came back to town, and it's like, hey, let's go to our local comic shop that's over in our mall over here. And we stopped there and looked around.
Nice.
I didn't buy anything at that one because I spent way too much money at Emerald. A little too many comics I bought there.
Yeah, that's usually how it is. You walk into a shop, you're like, this is going to be my budget, and then you just blow the whole thing.
Yeah, I spent a little bit too much. So the comics I bought were a few to read for the show. Then I bought the one we talked about last week, Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, and there you see it right over there. Like, it's an amazing cover. You got the actually alternative cover to this issue.
Those were the only covers they actually had in stock at the time, were the alternate ones.
Usually it's the other way around. You'll see them have the main cover, like the A cover as they sometimes call it, and then everything after that is usually the more sought after and harder to get.
And alternate ones, they had them all in different colors for the Rangers, the blue.
And I'm pretty sure they're based off of per issue, which Ranger and Turtle are being lined up, because they've done that in the past with the Power Ranger comics.
So I haven't read it. Yeah, I just bought it, put it in a sleeve, and took it home.
I actually read that one.
Sooner or later, I'll get time to read that one.
I read that one last week. That one was a really good one. I highly suggest to people out there, go read Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles. It's a really good read. You get to see the Shredder as the Green Ranger, and that's pretty much what everybody's been talking about. And trust me, it's not a disappointment. So I happen to do a little bit something else.
I see you got a haircut.
Yeah, I'm not too thrilled with that. A man wound up shaving my head after I won and cashed in this bad boy.
You won a briefcase.
Not just any briefcase, the Brawl USA Fast Pass Rumble. This bad boy gave me a contract that had any championship match at any moment and any time. And with the way my contract works, I got to choose a representative in Torture. And unfortunately, he lost after we cashed in. I got my head shaved. It was the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. I'm not too thrilled with that. But hey, got a new briefcase that I can lug around and carry my stuff in.
Else in the head with?
Yeah, I've been carrying my notes, comics, and action figures in this bad boy. So yeah, I won something along with my championship here. So while you were hanging out at a comic shop, I was winning stuff. So, but don't worry, I still
had more fun then.
Yeah, I don't worry though. I still got my comic book reading in between all this in. So that brings us to Weekly Comics, New Comic Book Day. Every Wednesday is brand new comic book day. New comics are hitting shops in the plethora of, like, almost this week I saw like dang near 50 different comic books that came out to stores.
So it's been a while since I've been to a local comic shop lately. When I went in Emerald, they have all the new releases on the back wall. And I just walked back there. I'm like, all right, I'm lost already. I don't know where to start at this point.
Yeah, and this is why we're doing this show, because a lot of people don't understand, or if they're trying to get into the comic book world, it is so large and so vast, and there's so many things in these shops that people get that way. As soon as you go in, you're like, well, what am I buying? You know, and that's why I've always emphasized, like, it doesn't really matter what you're buying. Look at the cover. If it pops to you, if it's a character you like, or you've heard something about the story, go out, buy the book. Usually they're around $4 or $5. You can contest to that.
Some, like the Absolute Carnage I picked up was like $8 for that.
Yeah. And wasn't that more of like
a printing of it too?
Yeah, so that just goes to show you. But even then, I believe they just dropped the graphic novel of Absolute Carnage, at least the first half of it recently, and that would have given you way more issues than just the one. But he's a single issue collector.
Yeah, I want the books.
So, but if you're out there and you just want to read the whole story, getting that whole graphic novel of Absolute Carnage that came out, I believe, last week, and there was another one that came out this week that people. Yeah, let's actually start pulling up some of these pictures. I happen to still get some of my comic reading in, but Absolute Carnage looked amazing. Here you see the cover of it if you're trying to go out and pick up issue number 1 like Michael just did. And like you said, it's a little bit confusing when you walk into the shop, but that cover sees you and pops out right to you.
And that's not the cover I got. I got the one with him and Venom on it. So the whole storyline is Carnage gets raised from the dead, a cult brings him back, and Cletus Cassidy has a mission with Carnage to kill anybody that ever wore a symbiote suit.
That is very unique, and I know there have been a lot of War of Symbiote comics throughout the years, because the symbiote race does not get along with each other whatsoever. They're always at infinite ends with each other. What would you didn't really get to read it, but I see that you got to at least check out some of the art. The art looks amazing.
The cover artist is Ryan Stegman. It was written by Donnie Cates, I don't know how you pronounce the last name. Apologize for messing it up. But they did a series with Venom not too long ago. Then it's continued from that.
Very nice. Now, what I actually happened to read was in similar to the same vein, because even though I was winning my lovely briefcase and all that, I still got my comic book reading in, still got my books in. The very first thing that I wound up reading, I heard a lot about it, was Venom the End. Now, this comic book...
I almost picked that up.
This is from the End series. There are a ton of these books out there, one-shots, which means there's only one single issue you need to pick up, and that's the cover of Venom the End. They also have Miles Morales the End, I believe Captain America the End, and this entire series deals with whatever character is picked, so in this case Venom, how they were going to die. Miles Morales, the End, how is Miles Morales, Spider-Man, going to die, so forth and so forth. This was an amazing comic book, and as you talked about with Absolute Carnage, the symbiotes and them always having a hatred for each other, Venom becomes the one protector of organic and humanoid life and literally encodes everybody's DNA into the Venom symbiotes, and basically by the end of the book, not to give too many spoilers, creates biospheres. And in the entire time period of all that, there is basically a mechanized version of matter and life forms that start attacking Venom. Huge things go on in this book between the war takes place over hundreds of years and shows how the Venom symbiotes and other symbiotes would live off of their host. So basically, in this instance, Eddie Brock turns into dust in Venom's arms, and it is one of the most painstaking things to read, because you're just like, ooh, yeah. And just, it's that one thing for the character of Venom. You'll hear us talk about it a little bit later on in our character spotlight of Spider-Man, that Venom introduced as a villain, but very much became an anti-hero character.
Character you could fall and actually like and enjoy reading and enjoy him.
Yeah.
Even with the Venom movie, he was supposed to be a villain, but he ended up being such a good character, you end up wanting him to...
Well, that Venom movie was based off of the Lethal Protector series of comic books that had come out, where Venom goes to San Francisco after wanting to be done with Spider-Man, be done with all the stuff that happens in New York, and he decides that he wants a new life in San Francisco. He becomes homeless and basically becomes a protector of the city. A lethal protector, if you will. But yeah, that one was an amazing book. What else did you happen to read this week?
So the other one was Dungeons and Dragons Infernal Tides. And that was a good one. It's brand new. That's #1 issue. Minx and his friends are caught in the middle of a devil-tainted corruption that has taken over Baldur's Gate, which is a real popular D&D game. Unveiling the secret sources of the heroes are its unexpected places they go to that threaten their sanity and their very souls.
Now, I got to ask, what made you decide to pick up this particular comic book? Because the reason I ask this is because it's Dungeons and Dragons. Everything I know about D&D, it's more of the role-playing aspect of things. Like, this is the issues I've always had with comic books based off of, like, Magic the Gathering and stuff like that. It's really hard for me to be like, well, why am I going to get into the world of a comic when anything I read here does not impact the way I have gameplay?
I've always loved Dungeons & Dragons growing up, playing it. I still play it now. And I was also looking for a comic that just started, that hit the shelf. I didn't want to pick up for a comic book of the week a number like 80 Flash or something. I'm like, let's start with something that just came out. And
kind of like my idea last week was starting off with the Ninja Turtles versus Power Rangers. Want, if you're trying to get in, look, new books come out every week, as we say. Sometimes issue #2, #3 is out, but they still have 2 and 1 that you can pick up and go in, put it in your collection.
And when I was at the shop, I was talking to some of the employees, just getting some ideas of what just came out that would be good. And they're like, oh, check this one out. Just came out. They even had a guarantee. If you don't like it, bring it back in 2 weeks. We'll refund you.
Oh, that's an amazing. Yeah, I've never heard that.
So basically, I can rent it. He's like, yeah, if you don't like it, bring it back. I'm like, I'll like it. Don't worry. Even if I don't, I'm not bringing it back. So, I couldn't do that.
So then,
but it ended up being a really good comic. I'm interested in seeing how it goes.
Like, I wound up reading recently that this week they also, they're like up to, I think, issue #4 of a Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons comic book, which is based off of the Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons board game that you can go out and pick up.
Originally from an episode of the show, I believe, too.
I think it's in the new season 4, correct? Yeah, I haven't been able to catch up on Rick and Morty season 4. But if you're a fan of Rick and Morty, there you go. There's Rick and Morty comic books that are coming out each and every Wednesday. Once again, they're up to issue #4. That's not too hard to pick up 4 months ago's comic book. Even then, most shops will be able to be able to order you those back issues. If it's somewhere, way over a year or 2 years, they're not going to be able to get it. But anything around 2, 3, 4 months, you can pick that up. So if you're trying to get into comic books, if you want to try doing the single issue route, that's a great, easy way. Just go to your local comic book shop every week, see what they have. They might get new things, they might get old things. You never know. So for me, I also happened to read a few books this week. I said I was going to read more than one, so I wound up reading 4 this week. The next book I wound up reading was the Hellboy Winter Special 2019. I'm a huge Hellboy fan. I love the world of Hellboy that Mike Mignola created. Not just the one he created, but Guillermo del Toro, the new 2019 film, the animated series. I just dig everything Hellboy. I love the Hellboy video game. So this book was really amazing. Surprisingly, Hellboy's only in the first story of 3 in this book, but each story is still very good. It still deals with that paranormal and the monster. Everything that you love from a Hellboy comic is in that Hellboy Winter Special. And if you want it, it's a one-shot, single issue. There's not going to be a bunch of them, so that makes it way easier over the next month to try to go into your local comic book shop and pick up that book.
See, I like one-shot comics because if you don't have time or the money to go invest every week buying a new storyline, and some storylines like Blackest Night went over not just Green Lantern, but every character.
Oh, yeah.
So it got expensive buying every comic for that.
Yeah, and then there was the main storyline that was offshooted from both the Green Lantern and the Justice League storylines. Like, it does get a little ridiculous.
One-shots are good. Just pick it up, enjoy reading for a few hours, and you're done.
Oh, yeah. It was really good. Then I wanted to do something special because this is Comic Book 101. Not everybody, we're a family show here. I have kids, you babysit sometimes, but I wanted to see what kind of comic books were out there that you could pick up for a littler audience, a much tinier audience.
I looked at some of those. I saw comics for like Betty Boop over the weekend, and one I thought was strange, I almost picked up. It was Archie vs. Predator.
Yes. Believe it or not, there is a ton of those Archie versus books. There's one that's Archie versus the Punisher. So that's one that you might want to go and check out. Like, we don't really get into Archie comics, me, Michael here, but that sounds really unique and interesting. Maybe you have to pick that one up for your weekly purchases for next week for New Comic Book Day. But for me, the next thing that I wound up reading, as you see, I like to be shiny because I'm a princess. I love being a Disney princess kind of person. So I wound up going out and getting the new DuckTales Fairs and Scares issues number 1 and 2. There you see them, ladies and gentlemen. And this is only going to be a 3-issue series. So in 1 month's time, there's going to drop the 3rd issue, and you'll be able to get the whole story right there. It was really unique. I love the new Disney's DuckTales TV show. So
I couldn't get into that. I'm stuck on the old show.
See,
I couldn't go to the new version.
We talk about this a lot on Nerd Talk about the fact that we get so stuck and fixated on one version of something, then when the new version or something like that comes out, people tend to be like, nope, it's not the version I like.
But see, that's the thing. My view is on that the new versions aren't meant for people like me. They're meant for the new generation.
This is the thing, though. I found, especially with this particular cartoon, the DuckTales cartoon, that it's enough of the, like, take the old stuff, tweak it a little bit to the modern society, and put it out. That's what this one kind of did. I was really into it the complete way through not just the cartoon series, but the comic books as well, known as Fairs and Scares and issues number 1 and 2 that are out right now. And once again, it's for a smaller audience. If you've got kids under 10 years old, this is a great intro comic that they can pick up and get into. And once again, your kids are probably watching Disney Plus right now, whatever it may be. They may be into DuckTales, and here's a great way of like, here, you can now get into comic books as well with the characters and comics that you like. Because to me, that's a big thing about reading comics and getting into comic books, is the fact that if you watch a TV show, if you watch a movie, if you watch an animated special, whatever you may be into, even video games, somewhere down the line, if it's popular enough, there is a comic book that does get made of it. On the table here, Rob won't be able to bring it up, but let me pull it. Here is a Dexter comic book made by Marvel Comics, which is an amazing, it's an HBO show that involved, Showtime show. It was a Showtime show that involved a man who was a serial killer killing serial killers, and here Marvel is making comic books about this character. It definitely not for a younger audience like the DuckTales comic, but if you were really into Dexter, there's a jumping point. That's issue number 1 for that.
But even for younger kids, it's good for parents go bring their kids, find comics, they can read them to the kids.
It's a great family bonding experience.
It also helps the kids to learn and read too.
This is why I picked up the Imaginext series as well of the toys. I've got a 2-year-old at home. At some point, she's going to see these toys, see these characters, and maybe, she'll probably get to play with them knowing me and stuff if she wants to. But it's one of those things, like, you can get your kids into your hobbies if you're doing it the right way. Your kids are very much clones of yourself. If you don't hinder what they may want to read, embrace it. Look, you might not be into Disney princesses, but if your kid starts reading Disney princesses, that might be the thing to get her to Spider-Man or whatever it may be, because you can use that infinite loophole of Disney owns Marvel, and there you go. But the DuckTales one, Venom the End, and Hellboy Winter Special 2019, Absolute Carnage number 1, and Infernal Fire D&D number 1 were our new picks for New Comic Book Day.
Yeah.
A lot of great reading there. I can't wait to see what comes out next week. Definitely, maybe some older books I might start trying to read. I definitely want to read that Kylo Ren. I said it in issue number 1. I really want to read that Kylo Ren book of, I like Star Wars and I really dig Kylo Ren, so I think that might be a good read.
Yeah, I saw a Flash one. I don't know what, it was like Flash 86.
Yeah.
I caught mine because it was a full cover artwork with no writing or anything. I'm like, that caught my eye. I might have to go back next week and grab that.
All right. So last week, you happened to pick our cosplayer of the week.
Yes.
We didn't get the chance to ask you out there, our audience.
But it's posted right now on Facebook about it.
Yes, do it right now. You already did.
did.
Awesome. So now you see it out there, ladies and gentlemen. It's already posted. You can now submit cosplay of the week. Show us your photos. Next week, it'll be Michael's pick again. He will get to pick the winner of our cosplay of the week, and we will
also, if there's professional photographers that took your photo, please link them too. Tell
Yes.
us their name so we can give them their proper credit.
Yes.
Because as a photographer, to me, that's very important today.
My world of professional wrestling that I come from, that is one of the big things. Like, so many guys take your photos. A lot of the time they donate their time to take the photos just for that. They always say it's about the exposure sometimes, and that's how you're going to give those people that exposure to get their names out there, because that might be the thing to get them some paying gigs. So always give them credit when you can give them credit. But I happen to pick this cosplayer of the week. She is 2 years old. She is little Chance Quinn, my daughter, and she wound up dressing up like the Joker with her very own hyenas, crackers and giggles right there. You see that big old smile. Truly my daughter. I loved seeing these photos earlier this week. I sent them to you.
I couldn't say that can't be the cosplayer of the week.
Yeah.
He's like, I got one, and I'm like, all right, it has to be a real cosplayer. When I saw him, I'm like, I can't say nothing.
Yeah, you can't.
It's too adorable.
It's too adorable, but I also wanted to use it as an example for everyone out there that, look, sometimes cosplaying is as much as going out to the store and buying the cheap handmade costumes, going out there and buying very cheap low-end stuff that has already been mass-produced, because the world of cosplay is about building families and building, building communication, building relationships with those around you in the world.
I love seeing parents get their kids cosplay with them. I did a photo shoot last year at Tampa Bay Comic-Con. A friend of mine, Nikki, we became friends afterwards. She was looking for a photographer. It was her kids' first convention, both daughters, and they were cosplaying, so she wanted someone to get the photos. And her two daughters, one dresses Harley Quinn, and the other dresses Mal from Disney's Descendants.
I got to do Mickey's Not So Scary, and I do Disney all the time. I love Disney's Descendants, and getting to see the little kids dressed like Mal, Evie, Uma,
I didn't know anything about Descendants at the time, so I looked up to find good poses for them, and she loved the photos that we took, and me and her mom became good friends, and we're going to be doing possibly an aerial shoot sometime soon. But yeah, then I got hooked on Disney Descendants. A friend of mine's like, you need to watch this. And
now, have you watched all three of them?
So yes, I was at my friend Kaylee's house. We watched 1 and 2 together. We were supposed to watch 3 online together, but the other friends couldn't watch it, so I just...
You haven't seen 3 yet?
I watched it. I'm like, I'm going to wait for them. I'm watching it
I've got the DVD at home. I'll lend it to you next week.
Good. I loved it.
I loved the Disney Descendants. There are actually Disney Descendants comics out there. Yeah. They are little, like, Tokyo Pop comics, but there are Descendants comics. This just goes to show you how big the world of comic books are. This is why we have a show like Comic Book 101, because as you hear how much, me personally, I love Disney.
It's a kid's show, but it was fun to watch.
Yeah, like they gave you great stuff within that particular film about, it wasn't about the Disney villains, it was about their kids. They created all these new characters and stuff, and I just fell in love with it. And, you know, that's, like I said, that's why I picked my daughter for Cosplay of the Week. Sometimes it is as simple as going out, buying a cheap costume from the Halloween store, buying a couple stuffed animals, and just letting them go out and play if you're going to a con. Look, especially the little ones, we understand not everybody has the money to be able to buy their kids the costumes, or even buy themselves the cosplays that they want. Heck, I would kill to have a fully functional Iron Man outfit, even just a helmet.
Yeah.
But that isn't in the wheel well of being able to buy for me right now. So look, I have a cheaper plasticky one, and I'll use that every so often.
So talk about Disney Descendants. New York Comic Con, I was up there. I got a chance to interview a lot of people, and we did an interview with the cast of Charmed for the new show on CW. And one of the girls I got to talk to was Sarah Jeffrey. She plays Maggie on Charmed, and didn't click in my head who else she'd done till we were watching Descendants. I'm sitting there, I'm like, this person looks so familiar. And she was in Descendants. She was, I think, Sleeping Beauty's daughter.
Oh, Audrey.
Yes, she was Audrey.
I love Audrey.
Let me IMDb it. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm at Audrey.
She's the queen of mean, and I'm the princess of weird.
So she was actually really cool. She's like super short.
Oh, I can imagine. She's in Disney's Descendants. Most of those kids were tiny. But yeah, no, this just goes to show you cosplaying in the world that it exists. And for you out there, when we judge these things, we're not judging sometimes who made the best costume, who did the best costume. Sometimes it's just as simple as, that's so cute.
Yeah.
Like, how can you ignore that? So, yep, that's our cosplayer of the week. My personal pick, my own daughter, because I can chill stuff like that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're cut a segment because it's just going to get added to the new segment, to this one segment. If you watched our issue number 1, we're not going to do movie reviews anymore because we're just going to include them into our character spotlights, which this week is Spider-Man. Yeah. Can we hit the theme song? We got a theme song, right?
Do we? Yes.
All right, let's start swinging our webs. I'm going to be Venom. You can be, I don't know, whatever.
Spidey.
You can be whatever Spidey you want. Spider-Man you want.
Peter Parker. He's the dad bod Spider-Man.
You look more like Spider-Ham, Peter Parker, but that is an entire... Like, we're not going to talk about specifically Spider-Ham, not specifically Spider-Man Noir. We're going to talk about all things Spider-Man, more so the Peter Parker one, because let's be real, Peter Parker Spider-Man has been around way longer than any other version of Spider-Man out there. The very first issue came out in August 1962, Amazing Fantasies number 15. We have the cover of it. There you see it. A very expensive comic book by today's standards, but once again, such an iconic look to a first issue.
I was at Hot Topic the other day, and they just released that Spider-Man pop.
Oh, I would not.
Issue number 1.
I would not doubt it, and it probably looks exactly like that cover. And that's what starts it all. Is Amazing Fantasies number 15. Stanley, Jack Kirby, all these great artists and stuff that worked on them throughout the years. It all starts with that comic book, and what a great introduction for that particular character. This is where we learn great power. With great power comes great responsibility, which is a mantra that sticks not just to Peter Parker Spider-Man, but any version of Spider-Man that has ever existed in the pantheon of Marvel Comics, whatever multiverse, universe you want to count that Spider-Man. Then the next big issue that we're going to talk about is
one of my favorites right here.
It's one of your personal favorites. It's one of my personal favorites. It's everybody's personal favorite. Even though this is about Spider-Man, we would be remiss if we did not talk about Venom and Spider-Man issue number 300. Now, we are so far removed from Venom's very first appearance, which happened in that 300 issue. You see the black suit Spider-Man there because it started as an alien symbiote costume attached to Spider-Man, and they've collected everything of the Venom saga in the Web of Venom Spider-Man, or Spider-Man Web of Venom graphic novel that you can purchase today from your local comic book shops, Amazon.com, eBay, wherever you buy your comic books from, or your graphic novels. You can pick up Spider-Man Web of Venom, and it will have all the issues involving the black suit, how he got it, and how Venom came to be, and how Spider-Man inevitably defeated such an amazing character.
My personal reason for loving that one is Todd McFarlane as well.
Obviously. I actually just saw an interview earlier today, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth later on when we do our character spotlight on Venom, but he was talking about Tobey Maguire's Venom in Spider-Man 3 and the Eddie Brock Venom in the new movie, and legit, it all comes down to size for him, because when he drew Venom, he drew him as this big, hulking, almost gorilla-like figure to be the complete opposite of the scrawny, nerdy Peter Parker, because Eddie Brock himself is a weightlifter.
Yeah, Eddie Brock was that small, scrawny guy, and we won't even talk about that movie. That movie doesn't exist.
We'll get to that a little bit later on in our character spotlight when we start talking about the animated and the film versions, but we're going to continue on talking about the comic books still, and one of the ones we need to talk about is the Clone Saga. This is the one where we're introduced to the Scarlet Spider, Ben Parker. In this graphic novel, it is an amazing piece where you're not sure who the real Spider-Man is. This led to the Scarlet Spider being around for a few years. Somebody makes a clone of Peter Parker, a couple clones, and this book deals with all of that, all those issues that Spider-Man had to go through with dealing with his clones. Then we're going to talk about One More Day. Now, this is by far one of the most tragic Spider-Man stories that is in existence today. Did you ever get the chance to read One More Day, Michael?
No.
Do you know what happens in One More Day?
Yes. Pretty sure.
Mephisto makes a deal with Spider-Man. In order to save Aunt May, he needs to make a deal with him. And the deal he gives is his marriage to Mary Jane Parker. How would you feel knowing that the woman you loved at the end of today would no longer be your wife? You would have no association with them.
That'd be hard.
And nobody would remember that marriage. But you.
Yeah.
You have to deal with that
Consequence the whole time.
It is so brutal, the fact that he was willing to do that. And it's not like Spider-Man just jumped into this decision. No, there was a huge hours of conversation that's covered in this graphic novel of One More Day with Mary Jane Parker and Peter Parker dealing with the fact that they have to give up their marriage to save a life, which eventually got reversed later on down the line, but still very brutal to read as a book. And then to go to another one that I feel is a little bit more brutal of a read to kind of keep on the idea of what it means to be Spider-Man is the Marvel Zombies storyline. Now in this one, Peter Parker ends up killing and eating Aunt May and Mary Jane Parker in a very zombies. Come on now. But what makes it so unique is the fact that after that event and after he became a zombie, he keeps the costume and the mask on for the remainder of his existence because he cannot deal with the events of what transpired. He holds the identities of Peter Parker and Spider-Man as two separate entities at times, even when he wasn't a zombie, and this is where you really get to see that focus of that kind of a story of him trying to deal with what Spider-Man does and how it affects the life of Peter Parker.
The zombie series was always good.
Yeah, they were an amazing series. That'll be in another future character spotlight. But then we're going to move on to Maximum Carnage. Now, we know out there, you're saying it to us, you guys are spending a lot of time on the symbiotes, a lot of time on Venom and Carnage. I get it. For me personally, I love the symbiotes. They're the best adversary.
They play a big role in the whole Spider-Man universe.
And even then, in the 1990s, Maximum Carnage was by far the biggest thing to come out. There were video games based off of it. This animated Spider-Man show dealt with it. There was so much that dealt with the fact of Cletus Cassidy, Venom, and Spider-Man in that trifecta with the Maximum Carnage storyline.
And that's where Venom starts like becoming a good guy, anti-hero, because Venom, Carnage is even worse. He's sociopath, a murderer, rapist, everything, and Venom's like, we can't even have this out here. He's like, I'm bad, but he's worse.
Yeah.
Let's team up and get rid of that.
And that was the first time that Spider-Man and Venom ever teamed up. They were mortal enemies up until that point, and that just goes to show you how vicious of a character Carnage can be. This is why the Absolute Carnage series was such a big deal for Marvel over the past year. This was their big event. As you know, some of the comic books, as we talk about, they do these big events every year. And for Marvel, the past year has been all Absolute Carnage. As you've seen on our Facebook page, we've been starting to talk a little bit. In April comes the Empire series, and we will cover that as much as we can in the future installments. But in that series, we're going to see Spider-Man and Wolverine team up again to join the Fantastic Four. Again.
That'll be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to that.
And it's not like it's going to be Reed Richards, Sue Richards, the Human Torch, or the Thing. No, it's the two kids of Reed and Sue that are teaming up with Wolverine and Spider-Man to deal with this Empire event that's going to have them witness the end of the Kree-Skrull War. And that is a war that has been going on for as long as Marvel Comics has pretty much been in existence. Then another great storyline that wound up coming out not too far long ago, we're going to talk about Superior Spider-Man. Now this one is the one where Dr. Octopus, Otto Octavius, becomes Spider-Man. He gets into the mind of Peter Parker, and instead of doing what you think he would do and be a villain and start wreaking havoc, he becomes one of the best Spider-Man out there, personal opinion, to ever don the mask. And a lot of people have donned that Spider-Man mask. We've talked about Spider-Ham. We've talked about Spider-Man Noir. We will talk about Into the Spider-Verse and when we talk about the movies. It's actually more red. It's just the shading and the coloring of that particular issue, Rob. He's giving me issues because that issue has a more of a pinkish tone to Spider-Man. But no, Dr. Otto Octavius, when he becomes Spider-Man, he's given that decision of, what am I going to do with these powers? And he does it. Great power comes great responsibility. Instead of trying to hurt others, he uses the powers of Spider-Man to do what Spider-Man would do. Yeah. And it was just a very, very good story. Other great stories that we do not have images of: The Last Hunt with Kraven the Hunter,
which was on my list. So I have a list here. We'll go with Kraven the Last Hunt. Kraven, of course, is wanting to kill him. He thinks he finally killed him, and it gets dark. Kraven kills himself, and then surprise, Spidey's still alive.
Yeah,
he buries Spider-Man alive, actually. So it got really dark at that point.
Oh yeah, one of the famous issues of that, we don't have the image of it, but I've seen the graphic novel when you go to the stores, is actually Spider-Man crawling out of a grave and this whole big scenery of a graveyard and everything like that. Really twisted stuff that Kraven puts him through.
Another one is Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut, because it's a true story of David versus Goliath.
Yeah, because if you know anything about the Juggernaut, depending on which continuity you go with, he's either a mutant or a man who was given magical armor to make him the most unstoppable, destructible machine that exists in the world of Marvel Comics. And just that, once again, David versus Goliath. The immovable force meets the immovable object.
Yeah. Then the last two, Spider-Man No More, because he's been wanting to quit being Spider-Man for so long, and he finally decides, I'm going to quit. In the last scene, you see him take off the outfit, throw it in a trash can, and just walk away from it.
Another one of my personal favorites is The Death of Gwen Stacy.
Which, that was my next one right there, which gets really dark and sad, because he's trying to save Gwen Stacy, his first true love, not Mary Jane, it was her, and he accidentally killed her.
Yeah, in a very tragic accident, he sends out
Green Goblin.
Yeah, he sends out a web line and accidentally snaps her neck, and poor Gwen Stacy is not around anymore. But she is around more because now we get Spider-Gwen, which is a Gwen Stacy from an alternate universe where Peter Parker didn't get bit, she got bit, and Peter Parker, got his neck snapped when she tried to save him. Reverse it, people. This is how multiverses work. Another great Spider-Man that we do have to talk about, because as much as we talk about Peter Parker as Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus as Spider-Man, some of these other people as Spider-Man, there is an ultimate Spider-Man, and he is Miles Morales. And not that Ultimate Spider-Man, sir. That is the animated one. There you go, Miles Morales Spider-Man. And this is number 1 of the graphic trade paperback collection of Miles Morales stories. Started in the Ultimates universe, which was an alternate universe of Marvel Comics, not the 616 continuity, but they started telling the same stories that we all knew and loved, but in new and unique ways. They would change up a little things here and there, and by I think issue 200 or so, they kill Peter Parker as Spider-Man in a huge flood, and then that left Miles Morales to become the new Spider-Man, and by far has been considered one of the best versions of Spider-Man to exist today.
I agree.
You would agree with that one?
I like Miles. At first I was like, no, we can't have, this just doesn't make sense having a little kid as him. But after reading it and then watching a movie that came out, I'm like, I actually love him now. He's actually probably my favorite Spider-Man there is.
And it's a little weird that you say that, because you can't really picture anybody else as Spider-Man at times, but he does such an amazing job with it that, but even then, we'll talk a little bit more when we get into Into the Spider-Verse, about how great that story was, about what it takes to be a Spider-Man, which will now start moving on to our movie versions and animated versions and TV versions of these characters, which brings us to Spider-Man the Animated Series.
The 90s cartoon, he was voiced by Christopher Daniel Barnes.
And it was an amazing series. Yeah. Anybody who watched that Saturday morning Fox Kids TV show unanimously considers this the quintessential version of Spider-Man. Like we talk about Batman the Animated Series being the quintessential Batman.
It's like the song you played earlier. Once you hear that guitar lick in the beginning, you're like, oh, I know who that is, what cartoon that is.
And even then, they've redone that version of the song so many times over that, here we sit today, they still remix the song.
So what's funny is the actor that voiced him was also Prince Eric in Little Mermaid.
I could see that. But there are newer cartoons that still deal with the events of Spider-Man, and it's called Ultimate Spider-Man. He wound up teasing the image a little bit ago when we were talking about him, and there you see the Disney Plus version, Ultimate Spider-Man. Still Peter Parker in this version of it, but he's in high school. He has Nova, Iron Fist, Power Man, and White Tiger as allies, and they work with S.H.I.E.L.D., and it deals with the entire animated universe that they started creating with Disney, with Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, Avengers Assemble. Really great animated show. And
there's been many other cartoons, like the one in the 70s, I believe, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
There have been a ton of them. These two that we're bringing up, his personal favorites. Yeah, personal favorites. There is a ton of Spider-Man stuff. Because we're going to talk about the films here next, but we're not going to talk about the Japanese animated, or the Japanese Spider-Man version of it, because I wasn't a big fan of the Japanese version of Spider-Man. If you are into the character and you want to see it, go out. You can find the links for it and stuff. If you want to read any of the books that we have talked about, please go check out the trade paperbacks or the graphic novels or the single issues if you can.
There's so much with Spider-Man, we could have this as a 5-hour show.
Exactly.
And still not cover everything.
Because then, after the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, we're going to go and start talking about the films. But I wanted to bring up something that you just kind of mentioned a little bit ago. You can't really see Spider-Man being a kid or in high school, but that's pretty much the premise of the Peter Parker and what we all loved about him. He's a man who has real problems that he deals with in the real world, but also has to go out and save the world time and time again. And one of the issues that I forgot to talk about was actually the Spider-Man 9/11 tribute issue. It was issue number 36 of The Amazing Spider-Man, and this is the only comic book, and legit when I say this, the only comic book to deal with the events of 9/11. And it has such amazing artwork in it. The final panel shows all of the firefighters, paramedics, first responders from 9/11 in the foreground, and in the background is all the Marvel characters. This is the only time I've ever seen Dr. Doom and the Kingpin cry over the loss of life that happened, because it was not like we've all know what happened on that tragic day, but it was something, especially in the world of comics, the villains that usually perpetrate these mass acts, they have a rhyme behind
buildings, do kill
they have
people.
a rhyme behind the reason. We kind of discussed that in issue number 1 with the Joker. That's how it kind of goes sometimes, and that was such an amazing book.
You mentioned that book when I was in New York. Cosplay of the week last week, Robert, when we were doing a shoot, we ran into some New York Police Department officers, and I actually got a photo of him with the officers, because I was thinking Spider-Man's a big hero to New York itself.
He's the only hero, like where DC Comics would make their heroes from Gotham, Metropolis, all these made-up places. He's one of the only people who actually goes out and deals with the real world as it exists. They draw New York in these books to look like New York. The video games you play, the last one that just came out,
such a good game,
an amazing game. What was it called? Spider-Man, I know that.
Yeah, I don't remember the name. I still haven't finished.
There we go for housekeeping next week. But anyway, that Spider-Man game, they had a lot of amazing things in it. Now we're going to talk about the films here, just because we don't have a lot of time left. We're going to talk about first Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire. A lot of people loved him.
I loved it. I was so happy going. I remember going in the theater, sitting down, and just so happy just seeing the things in a movie.
I think it's this weird thing of we love this film as nerds and as comic book fans because it was the first time we were given something, at least the first one and the second one, of the characters we wanted to see represented in the ways we wanted to see them, in a location we wanted to see them in, and interacting with a real life world. Look, that the Spider-Man the animated series from the 90s Fox Kids show was so great because he dealt with all his heroes, it was like the books,
with his schoolwork, and
it was like they literally took issues of the books and made them animated specials. In this movie, they literally took, it's now the formula that everybody kind of follows with comic book movies, of take from the source material the best parts you can, but make it your own and to a times. And those first 3 Spider-Man movies are going to be iconic because it's the first time.
I don't think.
Once again, we just said the Japanese Spider-Man was so hokey and weird, but this was the first time he seemed real. A lot of people didn't like Spider-Man 3 for obvious reasons, but if you rewatch it, which we may have to talk about a little bit later on, how interesting of a concept it was. Then we move on to Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and that was another unique take on the character. I hadn't seen him yet. I've got to see these films, but I heard he did a pretty decent job.
I wasn't a huge fan of Garfield. Even as an actor, I'm not a huge fan of him. So seeing a 30-something-year-old try and play a high schooler was hard for me. And the movie, it was still good, but it's not one of my favorites.
But one of everybody's favorites, which is the modern Spider-Man, the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man, the one, the only, the drunk man calling Bob Iger himself, Tom Holland, getting the franchise saved for himself. And what an amazing story. This Spider-Man, hands down to me, has been the best representation of the character in film, at least live action film, that we've ever seen.
Because he was a teenager when he started filming it, so you actually had that real high schooler feel playing the character.
It's just so unique, so iconic. Everybody, like, we all had to like cry a little bit when we found out Disney wasn't
and
in
that was
Sony.
one of the photos I showed was also everybody cried
when he died in the Endgame, but I'm
yeah.
more so talking about we all started crying and getting upset when Spider-Man left the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was going to be once again an exclusive Sony project, but they wound up making a deal with thanks to Tom Holland, and I can't imagine almost anybody else. Then we have Into the Spider-Verse, by far the best Spider-Man movie ever made. Shows you really what it means to be Spider-Man. You've got like 5 different versions of Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, Peter B. Parker, Gwen Stacy.
And all of them coming together. And once again, to me, this was the best because even though it focused on the Miles Morales Spider-Man the most, and then you get Peter B. Parker, the older version that got slipped through, it showed really what it meant. With the great power comes great responsibility. What it means to be Spider-Man, you do have to take that leap of faith of I can do this and I'm going to do this.
If you haven't seen that movie, you need to watch it.
All right.
You see Miles struggling as a kid, then he finally gets it at the end, what it means to be Parker.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us this week on Comic Book 101. Thank you very, very much.
That was a quick show.
Yes, it was. Once again, I am your Princess of Weird, Josh Johnson. I am going to be over at the Gulfview Event Center. I believe it is this Saturday, January 25th, for IPW Hardcore Wrestling Violent Things. I will be your hostess with the most, the ringmaster of fun like I am, and hosting IPW Hardcore. It's unlike anything you've ever seen. Michael?
I have no plans this weekend. It's actually a free weekend finally for me.
But you do have Cosplay in Tampa Bay, which we always have to talk about. Please check them out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's going to do it for us on Comic Book 101. Thank you for joining us.
Next week.
I will see you all when I see you.